Imagine standing in a queue of traffic, engine running, heart pounding. You've just robbed a bank, and your getaway car has broken down. 2 minutes. That's all it took for the whole thing to fall apart. Now imagine the robbery before that one. The one where the weapon was a cucumber. Yes, a cucumber. It does. This is the story of Peter. And I promise you, it doesn't end where you think, who is Peter? 5 feet 7 inches, medium build, bald 8 years, just served, now living at Harmony House, 1 room. Peter is standing in a room, not flat, not a house, a room, in a place called Harmony House, a halfway house for offenders on the outskirts of the city, the kind of place where the walls know too much and the carpet's seen better decades. He's just walked out of prison after 8 years. 8 years? And before that stretch, other ones. Most of his mates are either still inside doing long stretches, or they're dead. He's not a young man anymore. The life has written itself across his face, with those quiet eyes that have seen too much of the wrong things and not enough of the right ones. There's a statistic that haunts men like Peter. If you're a man over 35 who's been to prison, you are 10 times more likely to spend the rest of your life cycling in and out of the system. 10 times. They call it a criminal career. Peter calls it a trap. And standing in that room at Harmony House, staring at a single bed in a window with a view of a car park, he is, for the first time, desperate to end the exit. Let's talk about the crimes, because you need to understand what we're dealing with here. Peter was not some criminal mastermind. He was not sophisticated. He was not careful. He was, by his own admission, spectacularly, almost artistically, bad at being a criminal. There was the bank robbery, the one that earned him 10 years, the weapon of choice, a cucumber, hidden under a jacket, pressed against the glass of the counter like it was a firearm. The teller froze. Peter got the money, and for about 4 minutes it actually worked, a cucumber. Then there was the other one, the getaway car that broke down 2 minutes after leaving the bank. Stuck in a queue of traffic, engine dead. Peter sitting there, money on the back seat, watching the world inch by as the sirens slowly got louder. If there's a hall of fame for spectacularly unfortunate criminals, Peter has a wing named after him.
I can't blame anyone but myself. I had chances, so many chances, and I threw every single one of them away. If I could turn back the clock, I would have done things so differently.
In prison, Peter did something most people don't expect. He studied mechanics, mathematics. He showed up. He tried. But out here, back in the world, a CV with a 20-year gap and a criminal record as long as your arm doesn't exactly have employers rushing to the phone. So, when a representative from a local theatre group arrived at Harmony House, running a scheme called Stage Right, designed specifically for ex-offenders, no wages, just expenses covered, Peter said yes, not because he loved the theatre. He didn't know the first thing about it. He said yes because it was something, and something was all he had. The gig was simple. Paint the sets, move things around, 4 hours a day. Routine, structure, a reason to get up. The play was called Under the Big Top, a circus story, full of colour and noise and characters that were larger than life. Peter didn't know much about theatre, but he knew enough to know this particular production wasn't exactly setting the world alight. He kept his head down, brush moving, and stayed as far from the drama as possible. Then came the night that changed everything. Peter is in the back office, painting a piece of scenery, minding his own business, when Kenny Doyle staggers in. Kenny Doyle, the clown, lead performer in Under the Big Top, a man who had been treading the boards for 20 years and wanted you to know it. A man who once held up a matinee for 40 minutes because he felt the lighting wasn't honouring his energy. Kenny is sweating. Kenny is pale. Kenny is hunched over, like a man auditioning for the role of someone who is very, very unwell. Peter watches from the corner of the room and thinks, he's putting it on. Classic Kenny. Overacting as always. Give it 10 minutes, and he'll be doing vocal warm-ups. He was not putting it on. Kenny Doyle doubled over and threw up directly into Peter's paint bucket. Then, in one of the most chaotic sequences of events ever witnessed backstage at a provincial theatre, Kenny began to strip off his costume. Shoes first, then the wig, then the jacket, then the trousers, announcing to the room, to Peter, to the walls, to God himself, that things were about to go very wrong from both ends simultaneously. And then Kenny Doyle ran. Out the door, into the night. Gone. Frank Mercer appeared in the doorway 30 seconds later. Frank was the director of Under the Big Top and the quiet force behind the Stage Right program. A compact man in his 50s, grey at the temples, with the expression of someone who had seen everything the theatre could throw at him and remained somehow unflappable. He took in the scene, the costume on the floor, the bucket, Peter, paintbrush still in hand, expression completely unreadable. Frank looked at Peter for a long moment. Then he said 4 words. 4. You're going on. Now. Peter refused. No, absolutely not. No way on earth. Frank offered, said, I'll give you £100. Peter paused, looked at the costume, looked at the door, looked back at Frank, looked at the costume again. He thought about that £100. He thought about his room at Harmony House. Peter thought about 8 years, a cucumber, a broken down getaway car, and every single chance he'd been given and thrown away. And then he picked up Kenny Doyle's clown costume on the floor. Peter said, How? What do I even do out there? Frank told him to improvise. He explained to Peter that he had heard the script enough times. He told Peter to just go, with the words which hit him, be honest. Peter walked out onto that stage, a man who'd never acted a day in his life, wearing Kenny Doyle's oversized costume, oversized shoes, smudged painted smile, in front of a full house, and he improvised. He didn't remember much of what he said afterwards. He remembered the lights being very bright. He remembered his hands shaking. He remembered at one point simply standing still and telling the audience, quietly, that he wasn't really a clown, that he was just a man in a costume, doing his best. When the lights went down, the audience rose to their feet, a standing ovation. For Peter, here's what nobody in that audience knew. Here's what Peter himself wouldn't discover until 3 weeks later, when a journalist came to profile the Stage Right program for a national newspaper. Frank Mercer had done this before, not once, not twice. In 14 different towns over 6 years, Frank had run the same sequence of events with 14 different men from 14 different halfway houses. The sick clown, the stripped costume, the £100, the shove onto the stage, every single time. A setup, a carefully designed, meticulously planned moment of intervention built into the Stage Right program from the very beginning. Kenny Doyle wasn't ill that night. Kenny Doyle was, as ever, performing. He and Frank had rehearsed the whole thing. The stagger, the bucket, the costume, the dramatic exit into the night. Frank knew exactly which paint bucket Peter used. He knew the timing down to the minute. He knew that a man who'd spent his whole life hiding behind bravado, behind bad decisions, behind a mask of toughness, would only ever show his true self if he had absolutely no time to think about it. No script, no safety net, no choice but to be real. Every stumble Peter made on that stage, every shaking hand, every unrehearsed pause, the moment he stood still and said quietly that he wasn't really a clown, that he was just a man in a costume doing his best. That was the performance. That was what Frank had been building towards. Not a great clown act, not polished entertainment, but the truth. Raw, unguarded, unscripted human truth. From a man the world had mostly written off. Frank filmed every one of those 14 nights, and he used the footage. Peter's face, Peter's hands, Peter's terrified eyes above a painted smile, to campaign for government funding for rehabilitation programs across the country. The footage was seen by hundreds of thousands of people. Peter, the man who robbed a bank with a cucumber and couldn't outrun a traffic jam, had become, entirely without knowing it, the face of second chances in Britain. Peter still lives near Harmony House. He volunteers with stage, right 3 days a week now. He paints sets. He talks to other men sitting in single rooms, wondering what comes next. And every now and then, Frank asks him to come and talk to a new intake.
I didn't change because I finally did something right. I changed because someone put me in a position where I had no choice but to be honest. Standing on that stage in Kenny's costume, terrified, in front of 300 strangers, that was the most honest I'd ever been in my entire life. And it turned out that was all I needed to be. They say it takes the average person 7 attempts to successfully change a major life habit. I had more than 7. I had a lifetime of them. But sometimes it's not the 7th attempt that saves you. Sometimes it's Frank Mercer, Kenny Doyle, a paint bucket, and £100.
Thank you for watching this. If you enjoyed and want to see more stories like this, please remember to like, comment and subscribe. See you next time.